Deep beneath the surface of a forgotten world, in chambers that have known only silence for 60 million years, something stirs. The darkness of the tomb is absolute, a blackness so complete that it seems to possess weight and substance. Here, in halls carved from living stone and lined with necrodermis that gleams with an unholy sheen, the lords of a dead civilization wait in dreamless sleep. Their forms, neither truly alive nor completely dead, rest in stasis crypts that hum with the barely perceptible energy of technologies that predate most of the stars in the galaxy. This is a Necron tomb world, one of countless millions scattered across the void. On the surface above, wind scours desiccated plains where once great cities may have stood. The planet's sun, a dying red giant, casts its feeble light across wastelands where nothing grows and nothing lives. To any ship passing through this forgotten corner of space, it would appear as just another dead world, unremarkable among the billions of lifeless rocks that drift through the cosmos. But appearances, as so many have learned to their eternal regret, can be deceiving. Within the tomb's deepest vaults, past defense systems that have remained vigilant through the rise and fall of empires, past corridors patrolled by tireless mechanical sentinels, something is present that should not be. In a chamber whose walls are inscribed with glyphs in a language older than human civilization, surrounded by the sleeping forms of warriors who fought in wars that shaped the galaxy itself, there rests another sleeper. But this one is different. This one does not belong. It stands silent and motionless, a towering form of adamantium and ceramite, marked with the symbols of the Imperium of man and covered in the intricate wards and prayers of the Grey Knights. A Dreadnought, one of the walking sarcophagi in which the Imperium preserves its most grievously wounded heroes, giving them a half-life of eternal service. Within its armored shell, suspended in amniotic fluids and connected to the machine by a web of neural interfaces, a space marine sleeps. Not the brief, refreshing sleep of mortals, but the deep, dreamless void of stasis, a state meant to preserve mind and body through decades or even centuries between battles. How did it come to be here, in this place of ancient Xenos technology, surrounded by the sleeping dead of a civilization that fell before humanity even learned to make fire? What sequence of catastrophic events could have led to a Grey Knight, one of the Imperium's most secret and sacred warriors, becoming entombed not once but twice, his metal coffin sealed within chambers meant for an entirely different kind of undying soldier? The answers to these questions lie in the nature of war, in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, and the laughter of thirsting gods echoes through the void. They lie in the terrible price paid by those who serve the Emperor, and in the cold mathematical precision of Xenos civilizations that see the younger races as nothing more than temporary inconveniences, mayflies who will inevitably pass while they endure. But more than anything, the answers lie in what happens when ancient meets ancient, when two forms of immortality, two different answers to the question of how to cheat death, find themselves face to face in the darkness. What occurs when the Necrons, soulless machines that once were flesh, encounter one of the Imperium's fallen heroes, flesh transformed into machine? What strange symmetry exists between the Grey Knight entombed in his Dreadnought chassis and the Necron warriors sleeping in their stasis crypts? This is a story of two kinds of sleep, two kinds of awakening, and the moment when the tomb within a tomb is finally discovered. It is a tale that speaks to the fundamental nature of existence in the 41st millennium, where the line between life and death has become so blurred as to be almost meaningless, where immortality comes in forms both terrible and tragic, and where even in sleep, the warriors of the Imperium and the Xenos they were created to destroy cannot escape the eternal conflict that defines their existence. Welcome to the tale of when ancient silence meets ancient vigil, when the sleepers in the dark finally stir And when two civilizations built on defying death in fundamentally different ways are forced to confront what the other has become. The Silent Tombs. Understanding Necron tomb worlds. To understand what it means for a Grey Knight's Dreadnought to be found within a Necron tomb, we must first comprehend the nature of these ancient structures. The Necron tomb worlds are not mere burial sites or monuments to the dead. They are vast, planet-spanning complexes of stasis technology, defense systems, and arcane machinery that operate on principles that would drive even the most learned tech priests of Mars to madness. These tombs represent the culmination of a civilization's desperate attempt to escape annihilation, to sleep through the ages until the galaxy was ready for their return. The construction of these tombs began over 60 million years ago, at the end of the War in Heaven, a conflict so ancient and so devastating that the modern races of the galaxy can barely comprehend its scope. The Necrontyre, as they were then known, had made a terrible bargain with beings known as the Setan, the star gods. In exchange for immortality, they had given up their very souls, becoming the soulless mechanical entities known as Necrons. But immortality came with a price beyond even the loss of their essence. The galaxy they had helped conquer was now a burned-out husk, ravaged by wars that had torn the fabric of reality itself. The Silent King, the last ruler to command the absolute obedience of all Necron dynasties, made a final choice. Rather than face extinction or continue an endless war against foes that seemed to multiply with each passing year, the Necrons would sleep. They would retreat into vast tomb complexes built beneath the surfaces of millions of worlds, entering a stasis so profound that it would preserve them through the eons. When they finally awoke, they reasoned, the upstart younger races would have risen and fallen, the wounds to reality itself might have healed, and the galaxy would once again be theirs for the taking. The tomb worlds were engineered to be completely self-sufficient. Each one was designed according to complex templates that incorporated physical principles and technologies that have never been replicated by any other species. Using their mastery of transdimensional physics, the Necrons created massive underground vaults that could house tens of thousands of warriors in a space that seemed far too small to contain them. These chambers exist partially outside of normal reality, folded through dimensions that conventional physics cannot describe. But the tombs are far more than mere storage facilities. Each one is a masterwork of defensive engineering, designed to protect its sleeping inhabitants from any conceivable threat. The outer layers of a tomb world might appear to be simple stone or rock, indistinguishable from the planet's natural geology. But beneath this camouflage lie defensive systems of terrifying sophistication. Gauss cannons capable of stripping matter apart at the molecular level, Tesla destructors that can arc lightning between targets with devastating precision, and particle whips that can reduce entire armies to their constituent atoms, all lie dormant, waiting for the command to activate. The defense of a tomb world is not left entirely to automated systems, however. Even in sleep, the Necrons are guarded. Canoptech constructs, artificial beings created to serve as eternal caretakers and defenders, never rest. These mechanical servants patrol the endless corridors, perform maintenance on critical systems, and watch for any signs of intrusion. They come in many forms, each designed for specific tasks. The Canoptech scarabs are perhaps the most numerous. These beetle-like constructs swarm through the tomb in vast clouds, their primary function being to maintain and repair the structure itself. They are capable of breaking down matter at the molecular level and reconstituting it as needed, allowing them to repair damage or even construct new sections of the tomb. When threatened, these swarms can strip flesh from bone and reduce the most formidable armor to its component elements in a matter of seconds. Larger and more complex are the Canoptech spiders. These arachnid-like constructs serve as mobile command nodes and fabrication units. They coordinate the activities of scarab swarms, produce new scarabs as needed, and maintain the tomb's complex communication and sensor networks. Armed with various weapons including particle beamers and fabricator arrays, spiders are formidable combatants when the tomb is threatened. Most dangerous of all are the canoptek wraiths. These serpentine constructs are equipped with phase shift technology that allows them to pass through solid matter as if it were water. Their primary role is to seek out and eliminate intruders, and they excel at this task. Wraiths can detect the pulse of life through hundreds of meters of solid rock, sensing the beating of hearts and the flow of blood with uncanny precision. Once they lock onto a target, they are relentless hunters, phasing through walls and obstacles to reach their prey. All of these constructs operate under the direction of a tomb's central intelligence, sometimes called the tomb mind or master program. This is not a true consciousness in the way that living beings understand the term, but rather a vastly complex, algorithmic decision matrix capable of calculating responses to threats and coordinating the tomb's defenses. The tomb mind monitors every system, every corridor, every stasis crypt. It tracks power levels, structural integrity, and the myriad systems that keep the sleeping Necrons preserved. And it waits, patient beyond measure, for the time when its masters will wake. The awakening of a tomb world is meant to be a gradual, systematic process. In theory, when the predetermined time arrives, or when certain conditions are met, the tomb mind begins bringing systems online in a specific sequence. First, the most basic functions are restored. Then, lower-ranking Necrons are revived, warriors and immortals who will form the bulk of the tomb's military might. These are followed by more specialized units. And finally, the nobility themselves, the lords and overlords who will command the dynasty's forces. But 60 million years is a very long time, even by the standards of beings who claim immortality. Many tomb worlds have suffered catastrophic failures. Some were destroyed by geological processes, their chambers crushed by shifting tectonic plates or consumed by volcanic eruptions. Others fell victim to their ancient enemies, the Eldari, who hunted down tomb worlds in the millions of years following the war in heaven. Still others have simply failed, their systems degrading beyond the ability of the canoptek constructs to repair them, their inhabitants lost to malfunctions that no one remains to fix. Even those tombs that survive intact often awaken to find themselves damaged or incomplete. Stasis crypts fail, erasing entire legions from existence. Memory engrams become corrupted, leaving nobles insane or reduced to animalistic behavior. Power systems sputter and fail, leaving portions of the tomb dark and silent forever. The great awakening that the Silent King planned has become a stuttering, uneven process, with tomb worlds rising at random intervals across the millennia, each one finding a galaxy vastly different from what they expected. And it is into one of these tomb worlds, ancient beyond measure, complex beyond human understanding, and defended by systems that have remained vigilant through the rise and fall of civilizations, that a Grey Knight's Dreadnought has somehow found its way. The tomb does not know this yet. Its sensors detect something in one of the lower chambers, something that registers as neither fully alive nor completely dead, something that emits strange energies unlike anything in its vast databases. But the tomb mind is patient. It has waited 60 million years. It can afford to investigate this anomaly methodically, carefully, bringing its resources to bear to understand this unexpected intrusion. For now, both sleepers remain still, the Necrons in their crypts, the Dreadnought in its armor. But in the darkness, systems begin to activate. Sensors focus. Constructs alter their patrol routes, converging on the location of the strange reading. And deep in the tomb's central vaults, where the most powerful of the sleeping nobility rest, warning lights begin to flicker, signaling that something unprecedented has occurred. The silence of 60 million years is about to be broken. The Grey Knights, humanity's demon hunters, Before we can understand the significance of finding one of their number in such a place, we must understand what the Grey Knights are and what they represent to the Imperium of man. Among all the Space Marine chapters, among all the warriors who serve the Emperor, the Grey Knights stand apart. They are the secret weapon, the hidden blade, the force that fights battles that officially never happened against enemies that the Imperium refuses to acknowledge exist. The Grey Knights were founded in the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, that terrible civil war that nearly tore the Imperium apart before it had truly begun. As the Emperor sat dying on the Golden Throne, betrayed by his most beloved son, and the Imperium reeled from the revelation that chaos was real and that its corrupting influence could turn even the mightiest warriors to darkness, it became clear that a new kind of defender was needed. The Emperor, working with Malcador the Sigillite, created the Grey Knights as a chapter that would specialize in combating the demonic entities of the warp and all those who traffic with chaos. What makes the Grey Knights unique among all Space Marines is that every single one of them is a psyker. In an Imperium where psykers are feared and often killed for the threat they represent, where the gift of psychic power is seen as a curse that can doom entire worlds, the Grey Knights represent a radical departure. They embrace the power of the warp, channel it, weaponize it against the very entities that would corrupt lesser minds. This is possible because of several factors that make the Grey Knights different from any other force in the galaxy. First, their gene seed is said to be derived directly from the Emperor himself, the most pure and incorruptible source imaginable. While other chapters trace their lineage to the Primarchs, those demigod sons of the Emperor who led the Great Crusade, the Grey Knights claim a more direct connection. This gives them a level of spiritual purity that is unmatched among the Adeptus Astartes. Second, their recruitment and training is unlike that of any other chapter. Potential Grey Knights are not taken from a single world or culture. Instead, they are drawn from across the Imperium, selected not just for their physical potential, but for their psychic gifts and their strength of will. The training they undergo is legendarily harsh, pushing them to master their psychic abilities while simultaneously fortifying their minds against corruption. By the time a Grey Knight completes his training and is deemed ready for battle, he has been transformed into a warrior mystic of formidable power. Third, they are equipped with weapons and armor specifically designed to combat demonic threats. Every piece of their war gear is blessed, inscribed with wards and prayers, and psychically attuned. Their signature weapon, the Nemesis Force weapon, is not merely a blade or staff, but a psychic amplifier that can channel the wielder's power into devastating attacks. These weapons can banish demons with a single strike, cutting through the unnatural flesh of warp entities and sending them screaming back to the hell from which they came. Most distinctive of all is their armor, known as Aegis Power Armor. While it shares similarities with the power armor worn by other Space Marines, Aegis armor is covered in protective prayers, runes, and other wards. These are not mere decoration. Each symbol has been psychically charged, creating layers of protection against the corrupting influence of chaos. The armor itself generates what is known as the Aegis field, a psychic barrier that can deflect sorcerous attacks and provide protection against demonic powers. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about the Grey Knights is their perfect record. In over 10,000 years of service, not a single Grey Knight has ever fallen to chaos. Not one has been corrupted, turned traitor, or succumbed to the whispers of the warp. This is unprecedented. The Imperium is littered with the tragic stories of those who thought themselves strong enough to resist chaos, only to fall. Even entire Space Marine chapters have turned traitor, their gene seed and their oaths proving insufficient against the lure of the ruinous powers. But the Grey Knights stand unblemished, their purity maintained through millennia of fighting the most corrupting forces in the galaxy. This perfect record comes at a cost, however. The Grey Knights are bound by secrecy so absolute that most of the Imperium is unaware they even exist. When they deploy to combat a demonic incursion, they do so with the full authority of the Inquisition, and when the battle is won, all witnesses must be silenced. Imperial Guard regiments that fight alongside them are typically executed afterward, their sacrifice honored in classified reports that will never be read by the common citizenry. Space Marines who encounter them have their memories psychically scrubbed, leaving only vague impressions of strange warriors in silver armor. This secrecy serves multiple purposes. It prevents the spread of knowledge about chaos and demons, knowledge that could itself corrupt or lead others to seek forbidden power. It protects the Grey Knights themselves, preventing their enemies from learning their capabilities and developing counters. And it maintains the Imperium's official position that demons do not exist, that the whispers of chaos are merely propaganda from traitors and heretics. The Grey Knights operate from their fortress monastery on Titan, the largest moon of Saturn. Titan itself is kept as a private preserve of the Inquisition, hidden behind layers of secrecy and defended by some of the most formidable weapons in the Imperium's arsenal. Within the fortress monastery, the Grey Knights maintain their vigil, training constantly for the battles they will fight, studying ancient texts on demonology, and preparing for deployments that could come at any moment. When a demonic incursion occurs anywhere in the galaxy, the Grey Knights can respond with terrifying speed. Their fleet of strike cruisers can carry them across vast distances, and their mastery of teleportation allows them to deploy directly into the heart of the fighting. They strike with overwhelming force. Their combination of psychic might, tactical brilliance, and specialized equipment, making them perhaps the most effective anti-demon force in existence. The psychic abilities of the Grey Knights extend far beyond simple combat applications. They can project barriers that shield entire armies from the influence of the warp. They can read the probable futures, seeing the branching paths of fate and choosing the one most likely to lead to victory. They can create zones of sacred space where demons cannot manifest or maintain their forms. And in extremis, they can combine their powers, multiple Grey Knights merging their psychic might into attacks of devastating potency. But for all their power, for all their purity and dedication, the Grey Knights are still Space Marines, still ultimately human beneath their modifications and armor. They feel the weight of their duty, the constant exposure to the horrors of chaos, the knowledge of what they fight and why it must be kept secret. They know that they are the Imperium's last line of defense against threats that could destroy humanity utterly, and they know that should they ever fail, should even one of them fall to corruption, it could represent a catastrophe beyond measure. This is the nature of the warriors who serve in the Grey Knights chapter. These are the men who would pilot their dreadnoughts, who would continue to serve even after suffering wounds so grievous that no amount of augmentation could restore them to their former state. And unlike other chapters, where internment in a dreadnought is considered a great honor, the Grey Knights view it differently. For a Grey Knight, death in battle is not something to be feared. It represents the end of service, yes, but also rest in the dead fields beneath Titan's surface, where they can finally lay down their burden. To be placed in a dreadnought means continuing the fight, yes, but it also means further isolation from one's brothers, further years or even centuries of service, and the slow erosion of personality that comes with the dreadnought's existence. Yet when the need is great, when a Grey Knight has been wounded to the point where death seems certain, but his knowledge and experience are deemed too valuable to lose, the decision is made. The broken body is placed within the armored sarcophagus, the neural connections are established, and another Grey Knight's dreadnought joins the chapter's ranks. These machines are rare, far rarer than in other chapters, and each one is treated with a reverence that goes beyond their battlefield value. They are living connections to the chapter's past, warriors who have fought in battles that are now legend, keepers of knowledge about demons and the warp that cannot be found in any data vault. It is one of these rare warriors entombed in his dreadnought chassis, connected to its systems and maintained in stasis sleep, who now rests in the depths of the Necron tomb. How he came to be there, And what will happen when his presence is finally discovered are questions that will shape events to come. The living dead in metal, Grey Knight's Dreadnoughts. To fully grasp the tragedy and significance of a Grey Knight's Dreadnought trapped within a Necron tomb, we must delve deeper into what these war machines truly are and what it means to be one of the warriors entombed within them. A Dreadnought is not simply a vehicle or a weapons platform. It is a walking sarcophagus, a prison, and a gift. A curse disguised as an honor. When a space marine suffers catastrophic wounds in battle, wounds that would kill even someone with their enhanced physiology, the apothecaries face a terrible choice. Death is certain unless drastic action is taken. For most warriors, there is no choice at all. Their gene seed is harvested so that it might create future warriors, and they are honored for their sacrifice. But for some, those whose experience and knowledge are deemed too valuable to lose, those who have proven themselves exceptional even among the exceptional, there is another option. The process of creating a dreadnought is part surgery, part machine interface, and part spiritual ritual. What remains of the warrior's body, sometimes little more than a torso and head, portions of internal organs, perhaps fragments of limbs, is placed within an armored sarcophagus. This container becomes their entire world. They are suspended in amniotic fluids that preserve their remaining tissue and provide life support. Neural interfaces are surgically grafted into their brain and nervous system, creating direct connections to the dreadnought's sensory systems and weapons. The transformation is profound and horrifying. Everything the warrior once experienced through their enhanced space marine senses, every sight, sound, touch, smell, is replaced by mechanical input. They no longer see through eyes, but through optical sensors and targeting systems. Sound comes through acoustic arrays. Touch is replaced by pressure sensors on the dreadnought's armor plating. Even pain, that most fundamental of sensations, is filtered through damage assessment protocols. For a Grey Knight's dreadnought, this transformation is complicated by their psychic nature. The neural interfaces must be specially designed to accommodate their gifts, to allow them to still channel their power through the dreadnought's frame. This is one reason why Grey Knight's dreadnoughts are so rare and so valuable. The technology required to create them is even more specialized than that used for regular dreadnoughts, combining the arcane knowledge of the Adeptus Mechanicus with psychic principles that few tech priests can comprehend. The result is a war machine of extraordinary capabilities. A Grey Knight's dreadnought incorporates what is known as the Aegis system, a network of protective prayers, runes, and psychic wards that are built directly into the chassis. These are not merely painted on or engraved. They are infused with psychic energy, creating a protective field that extends outward from the dreadnought itself. This field can link with the Aegis armor worn by nearby Grey Knights, creating a network of reinforced psychic defenses far stronger than what any individual could project. The weaponry mounted on a Grey Knight's dreadnought is formidable. Assault cannons that can pour out a storm of mass-reactive shells. Heavy psi cannons that fire bolts infused with psychically charged energy, particularly effective against demonic entities. Nemesis doomglaives, massive force weapons that can channel the pilot's psychic might into devastating melee attacks. And of course, the dreadnought's own armored fists, each one a deadly weapon in close combat. But all of this physical might pales in comparison to the dreadnought's psychic capabilities. The pilot can still cast the powers they knew in life, their abilities not diminished, but channeled through their mechanical form. They can project barriers of psychic force, blast enemies with warp energy, and perform the intricate rituals and techniques that are the hallmark of the Grey Knights. Indeed, some dreadnoughts become even more powerful psychically than they were in life. Their centuries of experience and their constant immersion in the chapter's lore, making them masters of their art. Yet for all this power, existence as a dreadnought is fundamentally a form of suffering. The psychological toll is immense. Between battles, dreadnoughts are placed in stasis sleep, their systems powered down. their consciousness suspended in a state that is neither true sleep nor waking. This is necessary for multiple reasons. The constant neural interface with the Dreadnought systems is mentally exhausting, and prolonged connection can lead to sensory confusion, dyschronometria, where the perception of time becomes warped, and even senility. Each awakening brings its own challenges. Memories fade with each sleep cycle, eroded by the passage of time and the strain of the neural interface. Personalities slowly dissolve, the warrior becoming less human and more machine with each battle. The Dreadnought wakes to find that years or decades have passed, that battle brothers they knew are dead, or have themselves been interred, that the chapter they served has changed in subtle ways that make it feel alien. For a Grey Knight, with their heightened awareness and psychic sensitivity, this erosion is perhaps even more keenly felt. They are trained to be hyper-aware of their own mental state, constantly monitoring themselves for any sign of corruption or taint. To feel one's own personality slowly degrading, to recognize that with each awakening you are less yourself and more a weapon that thinks, is a special kind of torment. And yet, they serve. When the call comes, when the chapter needs their wisdom or their strength, they wake, they fight, they endure the horror of combat filtered through mechanical senses, the loneliness of being separated from their battle brothers by layers of adamantium and ceramite, the knowledge that when the battle ends, they will once again be returned to stasis, to sleep away decades more, while the galaxy moves on without them. This is why, unlike in other chapters, where Dreadnought pilots are seen as blessed, where warriors aspire to the honor of such internment, most Grey Knights view it with dread. The chapter maintains its Dreadnoughts, reveres them for their service and wisdom, but it does not glorify the existence they lead. When a Grey Knight falls in battle and finds true rest, it is not spoken of as a tragedy, but as a release from burden. When one is placed in a Dreadnought, it is done out of necessity, not choice. The Dreadnought sarcophagi themselves are miracles of engineering, designed to preserve the pilot indefinitely. Life support systems maintain the amniotic fluids at precisely controlled temperatures and compositions. Neural interfaces are self-repairing, using technologies that allow them to adapt to changes in the pilot's remaining biology. Power supplies can run for centuries without maintenance. In theory, a Dreadnought could operate forever, or at least until the heat death of the universe. In practice, attrition takes its toll. Dreadnoughts are targeted by enemies who recognize their value and their threat. Even with their heavy armor, they can be destroyed by concentrated fire or overwhelmed in melee. And unlike regular Space Marines who might be recovered and repaired, once a Dreadnought sarcophagus is breached, there is usually no saving the pilot. Their remaining body, already so fragile, cannot survive the trauma. This makes the loss of a Dreadnought a terrible blow to any chapter. It is not just the loss of a powerful war machine, though that is significant. It is the loss of living history, of accumulated wisdom and experience that cannot be replicated. When a venerable Dreadnought that has served for 1,000 years is destroyed, it takes with it memories of battles fought when the chapter was young, personal knowledge of heroes long dead, and expertise in fighting enemies that may have changed or evolved over the centuries. For the Grey Knights specifically, their Dreadnoughts often carry knowledge about specific Daemon Princes, about the tactics used by particular Chaos warbands, about the nature of warp phenomena that may not recur for millennia. This knowledge is recorded in the chapter's archives, yes, but there is something different about hearing it from one who was there, who fought these battles firsthand, who can describe not just what happened, but what it felt like. What the demons said, what subtle signs preceded their manifestation. So when a Grey Knight's Dreadnought goes missing, when one is lost not to destruction, but to circumstances unknown, it represents a problem of the highest order. The chapter will spare no effort to locate and recover it. Not just because of the precious war gear, not just because of the warrior within, but because of what it represents and what it knows. And now, one such dreadnought rests in the depths of a Necron tomb. Its systems are in stasis mode, its pilots sleeping the dreamless sleep that preserves body and mind across the years. It has no idea where it is or how much time has passed. Its last memories are of battle, of catastrophic damage, of emergency systems engaging. Then, darkness. How long has it slept here in the alien tomb? Days, years, centuries. In stasis, time has no meaning. The dreadnought simply waits, its systems maintaining the delicate balance of preservation, its presence a contradiction in a place built for a different kind of sleeper. But the tomb's sensors have detected it. Systems are activating. Constructs are moving through the corridors, converging on its location. The Necrons are beginning to wake, and they will want answers about this unexpected guest in their sanctuary. The question is not whether they will find it. That is inevitable. The question is what will happen when they do. The catastrophe. How it happened. To understand how a Grey Knight's dreadnought came to be resting in the depths of a Necron tomb requires us to reconstruct the battle that led to this improbable situation. Wars in the 41st millennium are chaotic affairs, where the unpredictable nature of warp travel, the vast scale of galactic conflict, and the intervention of forces beyond mortal comprehension can lead to outcomes that seem impossible until they occur. The world in question had no name in Imperial records, designated only by an alphanumeric string that identified its location in the segmentum tempestus. It had been abandoned by human settlers generations ago, the reasons lost to bureaucratic oversight, and the simple fact that the Imperium contains millions of worlds, and not all of them can be monitored effectively. The planet was dead, or so the initial surveys suggested. Atmosphere breathable but thin. Surface temperature cold, but not lethal with proper equipment. No obvious signs of habitation or resources worth exploiting. What those surveys had missed was what lay beneath the surface. The Necron tomb that slumbered in the planet's crust had been there for over 60 million years, its presence concealed by technologies that made it effectively invisible to standard Imperial scanning methods. The tomb was not one of the great crown worlds, not a center of Necron power. It was a secondary facility, a garrison post perhaps, or a way station for fleets that had long since turned to dust. Its occupants numbered in the thousands rather than millions, a relatively small force by Necron standards. The tomb had been damaged during the long sleep. Seismic activity had caused structural failures in some sections. Power conduits had degraded. Several stasis crypts had failed completely, their occupants lost to the void of malfunctioning technology. The Canoptech constructs had worked tirelessly to repair what they could, but some damage was beyond their ability to fix. The tomb still slept, but it was a troubled sleep, and the tomb mind had calculated that awakening would need to occur soon or risk total system failure. Then the Chaos Cult arrived. How they discovered the world is unclear. Perhaps one of their number was a psyker who sensed the strange energies emanating from the tomb's damaged systems. Perhaps they were simply searching for a place remote enough to conduct their foul rituals without Imperial interference. Regardless of the reason, they came in force, establishing a base on the surface and beginning whatever dark work they had planned. The Grey Knights were called in when an Inquisitor intercepted communications suggesting demonic activity on the planet. A strike force was assembled, 3 full squads of Grey Knights supported by a pair of Dreadnoughts, veterans whose experience in combating Chaos Cults made them ideal for this mission. They deployed from orbit, teleporting directly to the surface near the cultists' main encampment. The battle should have been straightforward. Grey Knights against human cultists, even those enhanced by chaos gifts, was a mismatch in the extreme. And indeed, the initial engagement went exactly as planned. The Grey Knights struck with devastating precision, their assault coordinated through psychic communication, their nemesis force weapons cutting through corrupted flesh with contemptuous ease. The Dreadnoughts provided fire support, their cannons reducing heavily armored enemies to molecular dust. But the cultists were not the real threat. They were merely the catalyst, the disturbance that would trigger events already set in motion. Their presence on the surface, their psychic rituals and warp-tainted activities, had been detected by the tomb's sensors. The tomb mind, analyzing this threat through its ancient programming, had made a decision. The tomb was already damaged and would need to wake soon anyway. The presence of life forms conducting activities that generated massive psychic disturbances represented an unacceptable risk. Begin awakening protocols. Deep beneath the surface, where the Grey Knights and the cultists fought their battle, systems that had been dormant for millions of years began to activate. Power flowed through conduits that hummed with ancient energy. Stasis crypts opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure, and the Necrons, those first warriors programmed to wake in emergency situations, began to stir. The first indication the Grey Knights had that something was wrong came when the ground beneath their feet began to shake. It started as a low vibration, almost subliminal, then built to a tremor that made even power-armored warriors stumble. Fissures appeared in the surface, glowing with sickly green light. And then, impossibly, structures began to rise. Black stone edifices, covered in glyphs that seemed to writhe and shift in the eye, pushing up through soil and rock as if the planet itself were giving birth to monuments of alien origin. The cultists saw their doom approaching and did what desperate, doomed humans have always done. They doubled down on their madness. Their leader, a psyker whose sanity had long since been consumed by his devotion to the chaos gods, began a summoning ritual. If they were going to die, he screamed to his followers, they would take their enemies with them. They would bring forth something from the warp that would cleanse this world of all life. The Grey Knights recognized what was happening immediately, a demonic incursion in progress, with the cult leader serving as a living gateway for something powerful to enter reality. The mission parameters changed in an instant. The cultists were no longer the priority. The demon had to be stopped before it could fully manifest. Every Grey Knight in the strike force turned their attention to the ritual site, converging on it with the single-minded focus of warriors who understood exactly what was at stake. They were too late by mere seconds. The veil between reality and the warp tore open, and something massive forced its way through. A greater demon of one of the chaos gods, its form so hideous that even the Grey Knights trained to witness such things without flinching felt revulsion. It towered over the battlefield, its presence warping reality around it, its voice a sound that could drive mortals mad. The battle that followed was apocalyptic. The Grey Knights threw everything they had at the demon. Their psychic might focused into attacks that would have destroyed entire armies. The Dreadnoughts advanced, their heavy weapons pouring fire into the monstrosity. But a greater demon is not easily banished, especially one that has just crossed over and is at the height of its power. Meanwhile, the Necrons continued to rise. Warriors emerged from holes in the ground, their Gauss weapons beginning to discharge. The Necrons, operating on programming millions of years old, saw multiple threats. There were the cultists, whose presence had triggered the awakening. There were the armored warriors fighting them, whose psychic emanations registered as dangerous warp-based threats. And there was the demon itself, a creature of the Imperium that the Necrons had fought in the ancient war in heaven. The battlefield became a three-way conflict of nightmarish proportions. Grey Knights fighting the demon while also trying to avoid Necron fire. Necrons attempting to eliminate all organic life while targeting the demon as a priority threat. The demon, reveling in the chaos, lashing out at anything within reach. And in the middle of it all, one of the Grey Knights' Dreadnoughts, an ancient warrior who had served the chapter for nearly 400 years, found himself facing the demon's full wrath. The details of what happened next are lost, as there were no survivors close enough to witness it. What is known is that the Dreadnought charged the demon, recognizing that its heavy armor and psychic shields made it one of the few things on the battlefield that might withstand the entity's attacks long enough to deliver a killing blow. The other Grey Knights, seeing this, concentrated their psychic might, funneling power to their venerable brother, amplifying his nemesis Doomglaive to incandescent brilliance. The Dreadnought struck true. The blade, charged with the combined psychic might of an entire Grey Knight's strike force, pierced the demon's essence. The creature screamed, a sound that shattered the lenses of anyone foolish enough to be recording, and began to discorporate. But in its death throes it struck back, hitting the Dreadnought with power drawn directly from the warp itself. The Dreadnought's Aegis shields, strong as they were overwhelmed. Psychic energy cascaded across its armor, overloading systems and causing catastrophic damage. The pilot, already pushed to his limits by the combat, felt his consciousness beginning to fragment under the assault. Emergency protocols engaged, his sarcophagus automatically triggering stasis systems to preserve his life as the Dreadnought's external functions failed. The Dreadnought toppled, crashing into the ground with the impact of a falling building. Its systems were failing, armor breached in multiple places, power failing. Under normal circumstances, it would have been recovered by the Grey Knights, taken back to Titan for repair. But these were not normal circumstances, because at that moment, the ground beneath the fallen Dreadnought gave way. The Necron tomb, its structure weakened by the awakening process and the battle raging above, suffered a catastrophic failure of one of its upper chambers. A massive sinkhole opened, and the Dreadnought, along with tons of rock and debris, fell into the darkness below. It tumbled through layers of alien architecture, down through corridors and chambers that had never been meant to hold anything larger than a Necron warrior. Its armored form smashed through walls of living metal that tried to seal and repair themselves even as they were being destroyed. Finally, it came to rest in a chamber deep within the tomb, a place that had been sealed for millions of years. Above, the battle continued. The Grey Knights, seeing their brother fall, fought with renewed fury. They banished what remained of the demon, purged the last of the cultists, and then turned their attention to the rising Necron forces. The engagement was brutal, but the Grey Knights had the advantage. The tomb was still in the early stages of awakening. Most of its forces remained in stasis. Those that had woken were confused, their programming struggling to make sense of a situation their ancient creators could never have anticipated. The Grey Knights fought their way to the edge of the sinkhole, looking for any sign of their fallen brother. But the hole was deep, its bottom lost in darkness, and their sensors detected massive energy readings from below. Necron weapons were powering up, more warriors were waking. To descend into that pit would be suicide, and they had already lost too many battle brothers. The decision was made to withdraw, to call for reinforcements and return with sufficient force to assault the tomb and recover the Dreadnought. The Grey Knights teleported back to their strike cruiser, leaving the planet and the tomb behind. They would return, they swore. No battle brother would be left behind, living or dead, flesh or machine. But when they tried to return days later with a larger force, they found the planet had changed. The tomb's awakening had accelerated. The surface was now covered in Necron structures, vast obelisks and pyramids that projected energy fields into space. When the Grey Knights attempted to approach, they were met with defensive fire of such intensity that even their heavily shielded strike cruisers were damaged. Worse, the Necrons had somehow sealed the tomb. The sinkhole through which the Dreadnought had fallen was gone, the ground above it smooth as if it had never existed. Scans of the subsurface showed only impenetrable walls of living metal, corridors and chambers that shifted and changed configuration, making it impossible to determine where the Dreadnought might be. The Grey Knights were forced to withdraw again. The decision was made to monitor the planet, to watch for an opportunity to strike. But the Inquisition, learning of the situation, made a different call. The planet was quarantined, its location classified beyond even most Inquisitors' clearance. No one was to approach it without explicit authorization from the highest levels. The risk of alerting more Necron forces to the Imperium's presence, of triggering a larger awakening, was deemed too great. And so the Dreadnought remained, sealed in the alien tomb, its pilot in stasis, unaware of his surroundings or how much time had passed. Above, the Necrons completed their awakening, securing the planet and beginning the slow process of assessing what had been damaged and what could be salvaged. Below, in chambers that would not be visited for years, the Dreadnought waited. The tomb sealed around it like a second skin, its living metal walls adapting to the presence of this strange object, incorporating it into their structure. The Canoptech constructs, in their methodical way, began to catalogue every object in the tomb. Working from the outer chambers inward, eventually they would reach the deep vaults where the Dreadnought rested, and when they did, the real questions would begin. Entombed within, entombment, in the absolute darkness of the deep vault, surrounded by walls of living metal that pulse with barely perceptible energy, the Dreadnought rests. If one could see it, and if one understood what they were looking at, the sight would be extraordinary. Here is a war machine of the Imperium, covered in the symbols of the Emperor and the Grey Knights, inscribed with prayers and purity seals, sitting amid Necron architecture covered in glyphs from a civilization that died before humanity discovered fire. Two forms of technology, two philosophies of existence, two completely different approaches to immortality and service, occupying the same space. The Dreadnought's armor shows the scars of its final battle. Burn marks from the demon's attacks mar its silver surface. One arm, the one that held the nemesis Doomglaive, is bent at an unnatural angle, damaged in the fall. Armor plates are cracked, revealing the inner workings beneath. Warning lights that once would have flashed are dark, power diverted to essential systems only. The entire machine looks like what it is: a wounded warrior brought low, saved from complete destruction only by the intervention of emergency protocols. But inside the sarcophagus, the pilot is preserved perfectly. The stasis field that engulfs his remaining body is operating exactly as designed, holding him in a state of suspended animation that is as close to timelessness as the laws of physics allow. His brain patterns are minimal, reduced to the bare minimum needed to maintain basic functions. His organic components, what little remains after his original wounding and the subsequent implantation into the Dreadnought, are held in perfect stasis, unchanged by the passage of whatever time has gone by. To the pilot, there is no awareness of his surroundings. Stasis is not like sleep, where dreams might offer some connection to consciousness. It is complete suspension, a state where even the flow of time seems to stop. He does not know he is in a Necron tomb. He does not know that his chapter believes him lost. He does not even know that time is passing. There is simply nothing, a void so absolute that when awakening finally comes, it will be as if no time has passed at all, as if the battle just concluded and he is being woken for a mission briefing. The Dreadnought systems, even in their damaged state, continue to function at a basic level. Power from the internal reactors flows through reduced circuits, maintaining the stasis field and the life support systems. Sensors remain active, but in passive mode, recording data, but not actively scanning. The neural interface waits in standby, ready to establish connection when the pilot wakes. Everything is designed to preserve, to wait, to endure until rescue comes or until the power finally fails. But the Dreadnought is not completely inert. Its presence affects the chamber in subtle ways. The Aegis system, even with most of its power offline, still generates a faint psychic field. The prayers and wards inscribed on its armor still resonate with spiritual energy, albeit greatly diminished. And deep in its cogitator banks, machine spirits born from centuries of service maintain their vigil, monitoring systems and keeping the sacred connection between pilot and machine intact. These emanations, weak as they are utterly alien to the tomb. The Necrons are beings of pure material science, their civilization having rejected the soul and everything connected to it. The warp is anathema to them, a realm of chaos and madness that they fought against in the war in heaven. Their technology is deliberately designed to be soulless, to function without any connection to the Imperium. Even their living metal, for all its seemingly impossible properties, operates on principles that are fundamentally material and technological. So when the tomb's sensors first detected the Dreadnought, the readings were confusing. Here was something that registered as artificial, clearly technological rather than organic. But it also emitted energies that the Necron databases, for all their ancient knowledge, struggled to categorize. The psychic emanations from the Aegis field didn't match any known phenomenon. The life signs from within the sarcophagus were organic, but in a configuration that made no sense according to Necron biology data. The tomb mine's initial classification attempts failed. Was this a weapon, a construct, some form of biological organism? The reading suggested all of these and none of them. It was machine, but it contained life. It was technological, but it radiated warp energies. It was clearly crafted by intelligence, but by whom? Not the Necrons themselves, clearly. The design was utterly foreign, not the Aeldari either. Their technology had a distinct signature that this lacked. Something new then, or at least new to the tomb's databases. For weeks, months, perhaps even years, the tomb's sensors simply monitored the Dreadnought remotely. The Canoptech constructs were busy with higher priority tasks, securing the tomb after the emergency awakening, performing repairs on damaged systems, ensuring that the revivified Necrons were functioning properly. A strange object in a deep chamber, emitting curious but non-threatening energies, was catalogued but not immediately investigated. But as time passed and the tomb's systems stabilized, the mystery of the Dreadnought became more pressing. The tomb mine's algorithms, designed to be thorough and methodical, flagged it as an anomaly requiring investigation. Resources were allocated. A patrol route for Canoptech constructs was modified to include the deep vault. And so the moment approached when the sleeper in the tomb would be discovered by the other sleepers, the ones who had woken first. The chamber where the Dreadnought rests is typical of Necron architecture in many ways, yet also unique to its specific purpose. The walls are smooth, covered in glyphs that tell stories in a language no longer spoken by any living tongue. The floor is perfectly level despite the Dreadnought's violent entry, the living metal having flowed and reformed to accommodate the intrusion. The ceiling vaults high overhead, its surface inscribed with astronomical charts showing the positions of stars as they were 60 million years ago. This chamber had once been a storage facility, a place where specialized equipment was kept for use by the tomb's cryptechs. Much of that equipment is long gone, either destroyed during the malfunction that damaged this section or claimed by the living metal's need to repair other areas. What remains are empty alcoves along the walls, designed to hold objects that would never return, and the strange alien machine that has taken residence in the center of the floor. The temperature in the chamber is precisely controlled, maintained at a level that would preserve delicate machinery indefinitely. The atmosphere, thin as it is, contains trace amounts of gases that would be toxic to most life, but that prevent certain types of degradation in Necron technology. Radiation levels are negligible, shielded by layers of living metal between this chamber and the planet's surface. It is, in its own way, a perfect environment for preservation, which makes it eerily appropriate that both the Necrons above and the Dreadnought below are engaged in the same fundamental activity, preservation. The Necrons preserve their consciousness, their knowledge, their very civilization through stasis and biotransference. The Dreadnought preserves its pilot, his experience, his service to the Emperor. Both have given up aspects of normal existence to continue beyond their natural span. Both have traded the warmth and chaos of true life for the cold certainty of eternal function. But where the Necrons made this choice as a species, pursuing immortality through technology, the Dreadnought's pilot had no such grand ambition. He was a warrior who fell in battle and was saved by his chapter's desire to preserve his knowledge and capability. His immortality, such as it is, was thrust upon him. And unlike the Necrons who sleep by choice, knowing they will wake to reclaim their galaxy, the Dreadnought pilot sleeps because there is nothing else for him to do, waiting for the call to battle that justifies his continued existence. The living metal walls of the chamber have begun to change in subtle ways since the Dreadnought's arrival. Necron technology is adaptive, designed to respond to threats and optimize its function. The presence of the psychic field, weak as it is, has caused the metal to alter its crystalline structure slightly, creating patterns that might serve to disperse or neutralize such energies. Glyphs near the Dreadnought have taken on new configurations, rearranging themselves according to programs designed to counter warp-based phenomena. It is as if the tomb itself is trying to understand this intruder, analyzing it, preparing responses, treating it as both curiosity and potential threat. And in a sense, that is exactly what is happening. The tomb mind, working through its network of interconnected systems, is doing what it was designed to do, cataloging, analyzing, and preparing appropriate responses to any situation that might threaten the tomb's integrity or its inhabitants. Above the chamber, separated by countless meters of rock and living metal, the Necron nobility have begun to take notice of the anomaly. Reports from the Canoptech constructs have reached the Tomb Lord, the highest-ranking Necron in this particular tomb. He, like all of his rank, is capable of independent thought and decision-making, not merely following programs, but applying intelligence to problems. And this is certainly a problem. An object of unknown origin, radiating energies associated with the warp, has somehow found its way into the deepest levels of his tomb. The circumstances of how it arrived are unclear, lost in the chaos of the emergency awakening and the battle that preceded it. What is clear is that it shouldn't be there, and decisions need to be made about what to do with it. Orders are given. A more thorough investigation is required. Not just passive sensor readings, but direct examination. The Canoptech constructs are to approach the object, scan it with every sensing device available, determine its nature and purpose. If possible, determine whether it poses a threat. And if it does pose a threat, eliminate it. In the Necron hierarchy, such orders flow down with perfect efficiency. The tomb mind receives the command and updates its priorities. Canoptech constructs that were engaged in other tasks are reassigned. Wraiths, with their ability to phase through solid matter, are dispatched to approach from multiple angles. Scarabs swarm toward the location, ready to dismantle anything that proves hostile. And spiders, the larger constructs equipped with more sophisticated sensors and weapons, move ponderously through the corridors toward the deep vault. The Dreadnought, of course, remains unaware of all of this. Its passive sensors detect changes in the environment, vibrations transmitted through the floor suggesting movement elsewhere in the tomb, subtle shifts in the electromagnetic spectrum. But without active cognitive input from its pilot, without someone to interpret these readings, they are simply data, recorded and stored for later review. The machine spirit within the Dreadnought, that quasi-consciousness that inhabits all sufficiently complex Imperial technology, stirs slightly. It senses something approaching, something that its limited awareness categorizes as other, as not self. Defense protocols, usually triggered by the pilot's decisions, hover at the edge of activation. But without the pilot's consciousness to direct it, the machine spirit can only wait, recording, monitoring, preparing. The moment of contact draws near. The Necrons are coming, converging on the location from multiple directions. And when they arrive, when they finally stand before the Dreadnought and begin their examination, the questions will truly begin. What is this thing? Who created it? For what purpose? And most importantly, what should be done with it? The answers to these questions will determine not just the fate of the Dreadnought, but potentially the fate of the world above and everyone on it. Ancient sensors awaken. The first canoptech construct to enter the chamber housing the Dreadnought is a wraith, chosen for this task because of its ability to phase through the debris and twisted metal that partially blocks the entrance. It moves with an eerie silence, characteristic of its kind, its serpentine form gliding through solid matter as easily as air, sensors active and alert for any sign of threat. The wraith's primary sensor cluster, mounted where a head might be on a biological creature, sweeps the chamber with multiple spectrums of detection. Electromagnetic signatures are mapped, temperature gradients are noted, structural integrity is assessed, and there, in the center of the chamber, is the anomaly that had been detected from afar. From the wraith's perspective, transmitted back to the tomb mind through quantum-entangled communication channels, the Dreadnought is a confusing mass of contradictory readings. The outer shell registers as various metals, alloys that the Necron databases identify with varying degrees of confidence. Adamantium, yes. Ceramite, that peculiar compound used by the younger races. Other materials that match no known composition. The structure suggests military purpose, the arrangement of components indicating weapons systems and defensive armor. But it is what lies within that truly puzzles the Wraith's senses. There are organic components, life signs that register as faint but present, cardiac rhythm, neural activity at minimal levels, biological processes slowed to near stasis. Yet these organic readings are intermingled with technological ones in ways that make no sense according to Necron understanding. The biological and the mechanical are merged, integrated, symbiotically linked. The Wraith circles the Dreadnought cautiously, its phase shift technology allowing it to pass partially through the machine to examine its interior structure. What it discovers is both fascinating and disturbing to the cold logic of its programming. This is not like the Necrons themselves, where consciousness was transferred entirely to mechanical form, the original biological substrate discarded or destroyed. This is something different, a fusion of flesh and machine that maintains both elements. As the Wraith completes its initial survey, more constructs arrive. Scarabs begin to swarm into the chamber, their numbers building until the air seems to shimmer with their metallic bodies. They approach the Dreadnought from all angles, landing on its surface, their scanning beams playing across armor and exposed components. Some attempt to interface with the machine's systems, seeking data ports or communication channels, finding only locked cogitator banks and shielded systems that resist their probing. A canoptech spider enters next, its bulk barely fitting through the chamber entrance, despite its ability to compress its form. The spider is a far more sophisticated construct than the wraiths or scarabs, equipped with advanced analytical systems and the processing power to make complex decisions without constant direction from the tomb mind. It establishes itself near the Dreadnought and begins a comprehensive scan, its sensors examining the object at the molecular level. The data flowing back to the tomb mind is unprecedented. The spider's analysis reveals details about the Dreadnought's construction that raise more questions than they answer. The armor is layered in ways that suggest multiple functions, not just protection, but also energy dispersion and perhaps even symbolic purposes. The symbols inscribed on the surface, which initial scans had dismissed as decorative, are found to have unusual properties, creating patterns in the electromagnetic spectrum that seem deliberately designed. Most puzzling of all is what the spider designates as the sarcophagus, the central component from which all other systems seem to radiate. Scanning it proves difficult. There are shields, both physical and of a type the spider categorizes as possibly psychic in nature, protecting its interior. Attempts to penetrate these shields trigger subtle responses from the machine, defensive systems beginning to activate at some autonomous level before shutting down again, as if restrained by some higher-order programming. The tomb mind processes all of this information, running it through analysis algorithms designed over millions of years to categorize and understand threats. But the Dreadnought doesn't fit neatly into any category. It is clearly a weapon of war. That much is certain. The heavy cannons, the close combat arms, the reinforced structure, all speak to military purpose. But it is also more than that. The care put into its construction, the biological component preserved within, the strange energy signatures suggesting connection to the warp, all indicate something more significant than a simple weapon system. Deep in the tomb's core, where the Overlord rests in his throne chamber, surrounded by the trappings of his ancient authority, a decision point is reached. The Overlord himself has not yet been awakened, the tomb mind's calculations suggesting that the situation does not yet warrant disturbing the tomb's master. But his Lich Guard, the elite warriors who serve as his personal guard, have been revived. And one of them, a warrior who held command in life and whose strategic programming is among the most sophisticated in the tomb, is designated to make decisions regarding the anomaly. This Necron, let us call him what he once was, a general in armies that conquered star systems before the word humanity had any meaning, reviews the data with what passes for interest in a being that long ago traded emotion for cold logic. He sees the military nature of the device. He recognizes, though the form is alien, the concept of preserving a fallen warrior to continue service. It is not so different, in principle, from what the Necrons themselves have done, though the execution is vastly different. The general calculates options. The object could be destroyed. Simple enough. Concentrated Gauss fire would disintegrate it at the molecular level, erasing whatever threat it might pose. But that would also eliminate any opportunity to study it, to understand what the younger races have achieved, to gather intelligence that might prove valuable when the tomb completes its awakening and begins its campaign to reclaim what is rightfully theirs. The object could be contained, seal the chamber more thoroughly, post guards, leave it undisturbed but monitored. This option has appeal. It represents minimal risk and maintains the status quo, but it also leaves questions unanswered. And the general's programming, inherited from a time when knowledge was power, rebels against leaving mysteries unsolved. Or the object could be examined more thoroughly. Take it apart piece by piece, analyze each component, understand its function and purpose. This option offers the most knowledge, but also the most risk. What if the object is a weapon designed to trigger upon tampering? What if its organic component awakens during the process? What if, and this is perhaps the most troubling possibility, it contains information or capabilities that could threaten the tomb? The general conveys his calculations to the tomb mind, which runs them through its own algorithms. Additional data is requested. The Canoptech constructs are ordered to perform more detailed scans, to probe deeper, to seek specific information that will allow for a more informed decision. What follows is a period of intensive examination that would be fascinating to any tech priest of the Adeptus Mechanicus, could they but witness it. The Necron constructs apply every sensing technology at their disposal. They map the Dreadnought's power grid. They analyze the composition of its armor. They measure the output of its reactors, the capacity of its weapons, the complexity of its control systems. And slowly, piece by piece, they begin to understand what they are dealing with. This is a war machine created by what the databases identify as humans, though the records of that species are minimal in Necron archives. The human inside has been catastrophically wounded, reduced to little more than vital organs and a brain, kept alive by the machine that surrounds him. The machine extends his consciousness, allows him to continue fighting despite injuries that would have killed him otherwise. The spider, in its methodical way, attempts to access the Dreadnought's cogitator banks, seeking information about its origins and purpose. But the Grey Knights, paranoid about security as befits their role, have protected their technology well. The cogitators are locked, encrypted, and equipped with self-destruct protocols that will trigger if improperly accessed. The spider recognizes this and withdraws, reporting that direct data access is not possible without risking the destruction of the very information being sought. What the spider can determine, through indirect analysis, is that the machine has been in stasis for some time. Reactor output is minimal. Life support is operating in preservation mode. All non-essential systems are offline. Whatever events led to it being in this chamber, they occurred in the past, and since then, it has simply waited, its systems maintaining their vigil automatically. This revelation triggers new calculations in the tomb mind. If the object has been here since before the tomb's awakening, that means it fell into the chamber during the events that triggered the emergency revival. The battle on the surface, the presence of warp-corrupted organics and their demonic allies, the damage to the tomb's upper structures, all of these events are now connected. This machine was part of those events. It fought in that battle, perhaps against the tomb's forces, perhaps against the demon. The data is insufficient to determine which. The general, reviewing this analysis, makes a decision. The object will be preserved for now, but more securely contained. The chamber will be reinforced, its entrances sealed more thoroughly. Additional sensors will be installed to monitor any changes in the object's status. And should it show any signs of becoming active, should its systems power up, or its organic components show signs of waking, immediate action will be taken. But there is one more thing the general wants to know. He conveys his query to the tomb mind, which relays it to the canoptech constructs. Can they determine if the organic component is still viable? Is the being within still alive in any meaningful sense? Or is this merely an empty shell, a corpse preserved by machines that don't know their purpose is ended? The answer, when it comes, is definitive. The organic component lives. Brain activity is present, though at minimal levels consistent with deep stasis. Cardiac function continues, supported by the machine's systems. Biological processes are slowed, but not stopped. Whatever this being was, whatever it did in life, it is not yet dead. It sleeps, as the Necrons sleep, waiting for something to wake it. This knowledge changes the calculus entirely. The general understands, in the cold way that Necrons understand things, that they are not looking at a derelict or a relic. They are looking at a soldier, a warrior who will wake someday, who will remember the battle that brought him here, who will seek to return to his kind. And that makes him both more valuable and more dangerous than any mere machine could be. The canoptech swarm investigates. Days pass in the tomb, though the passage of time means little to beings who have slept for millions of years. The canoptech constructs maintain their vigil over the Dreadnought, their sensors never wavering, their attention never faltering. They are perfect in their duty, as machines are meant to be, requiring no rest, no encouragement, no relief from their posts. But the tomb's leadership is less content to simply watch and wait. The general who made the initial decision regarding the Dreadnought has continued to ponder the implications of its presence. More data is always better, and there are questions that the passive sensors cannot answer. What technology allows the fusion of biological and mechanical? How does the organic component interface with the machine? What are the capabilities of this war machine when fully active? To answer these questions, more invasive investigation is required. But the general is cautious. He has not survived eons of warfare, both in his original flesh form and in his current mechanical existence, by being reckless. The investigation must be methodical, careful, designed to gather information while minimizing risk. A new squad of canoptech constructs is assembled for this purpose. These are not the standard patrol units, but specialized variants, equipped with precision tools and advanced analytical systems. Their task is to examine the Dreadnought more closely than before, to physically interact with it, while monitoring for any defensive responses. The squad enters the chamber in a formation that would be tactically sound even if facing an active enemy. Wraiths phase in first, positioning themselves to flank the Dreadnought from multiple angles. Scarabs swarm overhead, ready to respond to threats or to strip hostile systems to their components if needed. And in the center of the formation, a spider of unusual configuration advances, its limbs equipped with tools designed for delicate work rather than combat. This spider, designated as a cryptech's assistant, though no cryptech currently oversees it, extends a manipulator toward the Dreadnought's damaged arm. Contact is made with utmost care, the spider's force feedback systems allowing it to gauge the material properties of the armor through touch. The metal is dense, harder than expected, infused with materials that resist scanning, not as advanced as necrodermis, the living metal of the Necrons, but sophisticated nonetheless. The manipulator traces along the arm to where the Nemesis Doomglaive should be mounted. The weapon itself is missing, likely lost during the fall into the tomb. But the mounting points remain, and they are fascinating to the spider's analytical systems. These are not simple weapon hardpoints. They are psychically active, or were when the weapon was present, designed to channel energies that the Necron databases associate with warp phenomena. This confirms what the earlier scans suggested. The machine, and by extension its organic operator, are users of psychic power. In the Necrons' ancient experience, this makes them related, at least tangentially, to the forces of the warp, those chaotic entities that the Necrons fought in the war in heaven. The fact that these humans have learned to harness such power, to weaponize it, suggests a level of advancement that is both impressive and deeply concerning. The spider continues its examination, moving to the Dreadnought's torso where the sarcophagus is located. Here, the protective measures are strongest. The armor is thickest. The wards and prayers are most densely inscribed. And the psychic field, weak as it is in the machine's current state, is most concentrated. Attempting to scan through this protection proves difficult. The spider's beams are deflected or absorbed. Attempts at magnetic resonance imaging return corrupted data. Even simple visual inspection is hampered by what appears to be a deliberate obscuring effect. The humans who built this machine clearly did not want its inner workings easily discovered. But the Necrons have patience. The spider adjusts its approach, trying different frequencies, different scanning methods, different angles of approach. Gradually, piece by piece, a picture emerges. Inside the sarcophagus, suspended in liquid, there is indeed organic material. The shape is roughly humanoid, but distorted, incomplete. There are neural connections, fiber optic bundles, and more organic nerve tissue, linking the biological components to the machine's systems. The sophistication of this interface is remarkable. It is not crude cybernetics, simple augmentation of flesh with metal. It is deep integration, a true fusion where the biological and mechanical work as one. The organic provides consciousness, decision-making, the spark of life. The mechanical provides structure, capability, permanence. Together they create something that is more than either could be alone. And yet, to the Necron perspective, there is something deeply flawed about this approach. The organic component is vulnerable, fragile, mortal, despite the machine's protection. It requires constant maintenance, nutrients, oxygen, removal of waste products. It is subject to degradation, to entropy, to the slow collapse that affects all biological systems. Where the Necrons achieved immortality by discarding the flesh entirely, these humans are trying to preserve it, to maintain that which cannot ultimately be maintained. The general, receiving this analysis, contemplates the difference in philosophy. The Necrons saw flesh as weakness and abandoned it. These humans see it as something worth preserving, worth protecting, with all the technology at their disposal. Which approach is superior? From a purely logical standpoint, the Necron way would seem to be more efficient. And yet, something in the General's deep programming, perhaps an echo of the Necron tire he once was, recognizes a fundamental truth. By discarding their flesh and souls, the Necrons lost something irreplaceable. These humans, for all the imperfection of their solution, are trying to hold on to that something, to remain human even as they embrace the mechanical. The investigation continues for what would be, in human terms, several days. The Canoptech constructs map every external component of the Dreadnought. They analyze the composition of its ammunition, the design of its weapons, the architecture of its power systems. They even attempt, unsuccessfully, to access its cogitator banks through hardware infiltration, only to be thwarted by security measures that threaten to corrupt any data they might extract. One discovery is particularly significant. On the Dreadnought's chassis, beneath layers of damage and accumulated debris, is an inscription in a human language. The Necron databases, surprisingly, contain translation algorithms for several human tongues, gathered from previous encounters with this young species. The inscription is analyzed, decoded, and presented to the general. It is a name, not the designation of the Dreadnought itself, but the name of the warrior within. The name he bore when he was still whole, when he walked among his brothers as a living man rather than a consciousness sealed in metal. The name speaks of service, of battles fought, of oaths taken and kept. It is a memorial and an identity, a reminder that within the machine there is still a person, still an individual with history and purpose. The general considers this name, this marker of identity. The Necrons too had names once, though many have been lost or corrupted over the eons of sleep. He himself remembers his designation from the time of flesh, though he rarely uses it now, finding his current appellation as general more functional. But he understands, in whatever way his mechanically enhanced consciousness allows, the importance of names, of identity, of being more than just function and programming. A decision crystallizes in the general's cognition matrix. This object, this Dreadnought, this named warrior sealed in his metal tomb will not be destroyed, nor will it be carelessly dismantled for study. Instead, it will be preserved, maintained, watched, and when the Overlord awakens, as he inevitably must when the tomb is fully operational and ready to campaign, the decision of what to do with this curious artifact will be passed to him. In the meantime, the chamber is to be upgraded. Better sensors are installed, more sophisticated than the ones already in place. Scarab swarms are assigned to maintain the Dreadnought's external systems, to prevent further degradation from the environment. The entrance to the chamber is sealed with living metal barriers programmed to respond only to Necron command codes, and a permanent guard is established, Canoptech constructs, who will watch over the sleeping warrior, alert for any sign of change. These arrangements complete, the general turns his attention to other matters. The tomb is not yet fully awakened. There are still crypts to be opened, systems to be brought online, decisions to be made about the tomb's future course. The surface of the planet must be secured, potential threats identified and neutralized, resources gathered for whatever campaigns lie ahead. But in a deep chamber, beneath layers of living metal and ancient stone, the Dreadnought continues its vigil. The scarabs work on its surface, removing debris, sealing cracks in its armor with materials that, while not designed for this purpose, will serve adequately. The sensors watch, recording every fluctuation in power levels, every variation in the organic component's life signs. And in the deepest core of the Dreadnought, in the preserved brain of the Grey Knight, who once served the Emperor with all his being, there are the first stirrings of neural activity beyond the minimal baseline. It is nothing significant yet, nothing that would register as waking. But it is there, a subtle increase in brain patterns, as if some part of his consciousness is beginning to respond to stimuli, even in the depths of stasis. The sensors note this change. Data is recorded, analyzed, filed away, and in the algorithms of the tomb mind, calculations begin to adjust. The probability that the organic component will wake is increasing, not today, perhaps not for years yet, but someday. The stasis cannot be maintained indefinitely. Eventually, either the Dreadnought's power will fail, or its systems will determine that revival is necessary, or some external factor will trigger awakening. When that happens, the tomb will need to be ready, decisions will need to be made, and the sleeping Overlord, still resting in his throne chamber, waiting for the tomb to be fully prepared before he assumes his command, will need to be informed that they have a guest, an unexpected, unwanted, but undeniably interesting guest. A guest who, when he wakes, will find himself in a situation beyond the scope of any training, any briefing, any imaginable nightmare that the Grey Knights could have prepared him for. He will wake to find himself alone, sealed in alien technology, surrounded by enemies who have studied him while he slept. And he will have to decide, in those first crucial moments of consciousness, whether to fight, to flee, or to try something that has perhaps never been successfully done before, to communicate with the Necrons. But that moment is not yet. For now, all is silent in the tomb within the tomb. The sleeper sleeps, the watchers watch, and time, that constant in a universe where so little remains unchanged, continues its inexorable advance. A consciousness stirs. The first sensation is not thought but feeling, or rather, the memory of feeling, echoing through neural pathways that have been dormant for far too long. Pain, the Dreadnought pilot's last conscious experience, flickers through his mind, but it is distant, muted, like a memory of a memory, already fading even as awareness begins to return. The stasis field that has preserved him begins to weaken, power levels dropping as the Dreadnought's systems detect something. Perhaps damage to the field generators, perhaps a pre-programmed time limit reached, perhaps simply the natural degradation that affects even the most sophisticated technology given enough time. Whatever the cause, the result is the same. After what is, unknown to the pilot, several years of absolute suspension, consciousness begins its slow return. The process is gradual, designed to be so by the tech priests who crafted the Dreadnought systems. Too rapid an awakening from deep stasis can cause neural damage, can leave the pilot confused or even catatonic, so the systems bring him back carefully, raising his core temperature by fractions of a degree, increasing blood flow to his brain in measured increments, stimulating neural activity through precisely calibrated electrical impulses. For the pilot, there is no sense of time passing, no awareness that he is waking. There is only the slow transition from absolute nothingness to something that might eventually become consciousness. Fragments of memory surface, disconnected and confused. The battle, the demon, the charge, the impact. Then, darkness. How long has it been? The question forms in his mind before he is fully capable of understanding it. Minutes? Hours? The usual passage of time between stasis sleep and awakening is measured in weeks or months at most. But something feels different. The quality of the silence around him is wrong. The usual sounds of Titan's fortress monastery, the hum of machinery, the distant echoes of his battle brother's activities are absent. Awareness spreads outward from his core. He becomes conscious of the amniotic fluid surrounding what remains of his body. He feels, in the abstract way that Dreadnought pilots feel such things, the pressure sensors on his armor reporting damage. Multiple systems are offline. Power levels are lower than they should be. Weapon systems are either damaged or missing entirely. The neural interface, that web of connections linking his organic brain to the Dreadnought's machine systems, begins to establish itself. Data flows in, first as a trickle, then as a flood. Diagnostic reports, damage assessments, environmental readings. And it is these environmental readings that first alert him that something is very, very wrong. The atmosphere around him is thin but breathable by human standards, though his Dreadnought has no need to breathe. Temperature is controlled, colder than Titan, but well within tolerable range. Radiation levels are minimal, but the energy signatures, the electromagnetic spectrum, the background readings of the environment, all are alien. This is not Titan. This is not anywhere he recognizes. His optical sensors come online, feeding data to his brain that his consciousness interprets as sight. The chamber around him is dark, or would be to organic eyes. His sensors compensate automatically, painting the darkness with overlays of infrared and other spectrums, creating a composite image of his surroundings. What he sees freezes his thoughts for a long moment. Black stone walls covered in glyphs that seem to move and writhe in his perception. Architecture that is clearly artificial but equally clearly not human, not imperial, not anything from the vast catalogue of Xeno's species he studied during his training. And everywhere, the green glow of energy signatures that set every warning system in his mind screaming, Necrons. The realization hits with the force of a thunderhammer blow. He is in a Necron tomb. How? The memories are fragmented, but he forces himself to focus, to piece together what happened. The battle, the demon, the fall. He must have fallen into the tomb during the fighting, but that was, what, hours ago? Days? He attempts to access his chronometer, the internal clock that should tell him exactly how long he has been in stasis. But the system is damaged, showing only corrupted data. He tries to establish Vox communication with his chapter, with any Imperial forces that might be in range. Silence. Either his communications array is too damaged to function, or there are no Imperial forces within range, or the tomb's walls are blocking transmission. Panic, a sensation he thought he had long since mastered, threatens to overwhelm him. He is alone, damaged, in the heart of an enemy stronghold, with no way to call for help or determine how much time has passed. For a moment, the training of decades threatens to fail, the enormity of his situation crushing down upon whatever remains of his human psyche. But he is a Grey Knight. More than that, he is a venerable warrior who has fought for centuries, who has faced demons that could break lesser minds with their mere presence. He has training for this, protocols for operating in isolation, techniques for maintaining psychological stability even in the direst circumstances. He forces his consciousness to focus, to move beyond panic to analysis. First priority, assess capabilities. He runs through his systems methodically. Sensors, partially functional. Locomotion, one leg damaged but operational. Arms, one missing, one damaged but potentially functional. Weapons, missing or offline. Power, approximately 30% of optimal levels. Life support, functioning normally. Psychic capabilities, unknown until tested. Second priority, assess environment. He is in a sealed chamber. The walls are living metal, necrodermis, nearly impervious to conventional damage. The only entrance he can detect is sealed. Sensor readings suggest movement beyond the chamber. Regular patrol patterns that can only be canoptech constructs. He is not just in a tomb, he is imprisoned in one. Third priority, determine options. He could attempt to break out, to smash through the walls with whatever strength remains to him. But the walls are living metal, self-repairing, and his damaged state makes it unlikely he could inflict significant damage before his power failed. He could go back into stasis, hoping that rescue will come. But how long has he already slept? If no one has found him yet, perhaps no one is coming. Or he could wait, gather more information, try to understand his situation more fully before committing to any course of action. This option has appeal. It is what his training suggests, what tactical doctrine demands. Assess the situation fully before acting. But it also means accepting his current captivity, at least temporarily, and that galls him in ways that are difficult to articulate even to himself. As he ponders these options, something changes in the sensor readings. Movement outside the chamber, multiple signatures, canoptech constructs by their energy profiles, converging on his location. And then, with a hiss of equalizing pressure that his acoustic sensors pick up, even through the thick walls, the entrance begins to open. Living metal flows aside like water, revealing the corridor beyond. And there, framed in the opening, is a sight that confirms his worst fears. Necron warriors, their skeletal metal forms glowing with the sickly green energy that powers them. But not mindless warriors, not the basic troops who might have discovered him by accident. These carry themselves differently, with purpose and intelligence in their movements. And behind them, towering over them, is something else. A Necron of clear authority, its form more elaborate, its bearing unmistakable, even across the gulf of Xenos anatomy. A lord, or something close to it, come to examine the unexpected guest in its tomb. The Grey Knight Dreadnought faces them across the chamber, his damaged sensors locked onto these ancient enemies of mankind. And for a long moment, neither side moves, neither speaks, neither acts. It is a tableau frozen in time, the ancient and the ageless, the living and the undying, face to face in a chamber deep beneath an alien world. What happens next will depend on choices made in the next few moments, on whether ancient enmity or ancient curiosity will prove stronger, on whether the wisdom of ages will counsel destruction or dialogue. Recognition and revulsion. The Necron general, for that is indeed what stands in the doorway, regards the Dreadnought with what might be called interest, if one could attribute such an emotion to a being whose consciousness is encoded in quantum matrices rather than organic neurons. His optical sensors, far more sophisticated than the Dreadnought's damaged arrays, take in every detail of the machine and the warrior within. What the general sees is a contradiction wrapped in adamantium. The technology is crude compared to Necron standards, built with materials and principles that seem almost primitive. And yet, there is a sophistication to it, a level of integration between the biological and mechanical that suggests understanding beyond simple augmentation. The humans who built this, whoever they are, whatever they may be, are not the savages that the Necron databases suggested they were. More intriguing is the psychic signature that emanates from the machine. It is weak now, the warrior within clearly damaged or depleted, but it is unmistakable. This human has, or had, significant connection to the warp, the cursed realm that the Necrons fought to seal away in ages past. And yet, the signature is different from the chaotic, corrupted emanations of the demon that was fought on the surface. This is more controlled, more focused, almost pure, if such a word can be applied to anything connected to the Imperium. The general's cogitation matrices process a wealth of data in the microseconds that pass. This warrior fought the demon. The traces of warp energy on the Dreadnought's armor show patterns consistent with attacks from demonic entities. And yet, he survived. Or at least his machine did, suggesting either great power or great skill in resisting corruption. The humans have created warriors who can fight the denizens of the warp, who can resist their influence. This is information worth having. The Necrons have fought the forces of chaos before and will fight them again. Any intelligence on how the younger races have learned to combat them could prove valuable. But more than that, there is something about this entire situation that resonates with the general in ways his programming cannot fully explain. Here is a warrior, like himself, preserved beyond his natural span to continue service. Here is a consciousness that has given up organic existence, more or less, to persist in mechanical form. Here is a being who sleeps between battles, who wakes to fight, and then returns to darkness. The parallels to his own existence are unmistakable, and they trouble something in his core programming that might once have been called conscience. From the Dreadnought's perspective, the Necron Lord's examination is taking far too long. Every tactical doctrine the Grey Knight knows screams at him that he is in terrible danger, that he is outmatched and surrounded, that his only chance of survival is immediate action. But he is also a veteran of countless battles, experienced enough to know that sometimes the only winning move is not to play, to wait and see what the enemy does before committing to a course of action. So he waits, his damaged systems on the edge of activation, ready to fight if necessary, but not initiating hostilities. And he tries, despite the limitations of his damaged communication systems, to do something that he has never attempted before in all his years of service. He tries to speak to the Necrons. The attempt is clumsy, filtered through mechanical systems designed for Vox communication with other Imperial forces, translated through languages and protocols that have no common ground with Necron communication. But he forms words in Gothic, the common tongue of the Imperium, and broadcasts them on multiple frequencies, hoping that something, anything, will be understood. "I am a warrior of the Emperor of mankind," he sends. his vox speaker producing sounds that are harsh and grating in the tomb's atmosphere. "I was wounded in battle against the forces of chaos. I did not choose to intrude upon your tomb. If you allow me to depart, I will do so, and trouble you no further." The Necrons, of course, have no capability to understand Gothic in its spoken form. Their languages are encoded in quantum patterns, in mathematical sequences, in forms of communication that predate most of the galaxy's current inhabitants. But the tomb mind, analyzing the sounds, recognizes them as structured language, as an attempt at communication rather than mere noise or battle cries. This recognition is relayed to the general, who makes a decision that will seem, even by Necron standards, unusual. He orders his warriors to stand down, to maintain their positions but not to attack. And he orders the tomb mind to attempt analysis of the language being used to see if translation is possible. What follows is a process of computational linguistics that would fascinate any scholar, could they witness it. The tomb mind takes the sound patterns produced by the Dreadnought and breaks them down into their component parts. It compares them against the limited linguistic databases it possesses, looking for patterns, structures, markers of meaning. And slowly, very slowly, it begins to extract understanding. The language is called Gothic, a derivative of ancient Earth languages that the Necron databases have some fragmentary knowledge of. The databases are 60 million years out of date, and the language has evolved unrecognizably in that time, but there are bones of structure that remain consistent. Grammatical patterns, phonetic rules. The algorithms work, cross-referencing, extrapolating, building a translation matrix from first principles. It takes what would be, in human terms, nearly an hour. The Dreadnought repeats his message multiple times, varying his phrasing, providing more data for the analysis. And finally, the tomb mind produces something that resembles translation. Not perfect, not complete, but enough to convey basic meaning. The general, receiving this translation, considers how to respond. The Necrons have no vocal capabilities in the traditional sense. They can produce sounds, yes, mechanical screeching, and the hum of their energy systems. But language as this human understands it, that would require different methods. He orders a cryptek to be awakened, one of the few in the tomb whose specialty includes communication and interaction with other species. The cryptek arrives with surprising speed, its form more elaborate than the warriors, festooned with technological implements that serve purposes both arcane and practical. The cryptek studies the situation for a moment, its sensors analyzing the Dreadnought and the attempted communication. Then it reaches into its own systems, into storage matrices that contain knowledge gathered over eons, and pulls forth something that has not been used in ages beyond counting. It is a translation device, primitive by Necron standards, but sophisticated enough to bridge the gap between different modes of communication. The cryptek activates it, and a holographic display appears in the air between the Necrons and the Dreadnought, showing symbols, ideograms, simple pictures that might convey meaning even across the gulf between species. The first symbol is clear enough, a question mark, or the Necron equivalent of one, a request for information. What are you? Why are you here? What do you want? The Dreadnought's machine spirit, working through damaged systems, attempts to process this. The optical sensors detect the holographic display. The cogitators recognize it as a communication attempt. And the pilot, straining through the neural interface to understand what is being shown, begins to grasp that something unprecedented is happening. The Necrons are trying to talk to him, not interrogation, not demands. An actual attempt at dialogue, at understanding. It goes against everything he has been taught about these Xenos, everything the Imperial doctrine claims about their nature. The Necrons are soulless machines, ancient terrors that care nothing for communication, that see all life as a threat to be eliminated. And yet, here they are, attempting to establish some form of exchange. The pilot considers his response carefully. He has no way to produce the holographic symbols they are using. His systems aren't designed for it, but he has his Vox system, and if they could translate his first message, Perhaps they can translate another. "I am Brother Ancient Static of the Grey Knights chapter of the Adeptus Astartes," he sends, the name portion corrupted by damage to his systems. "I fought a demon on the surface of this world. I was cast down during the battle. I have been in stasis for an unknown period. I request permission to depart and return to my chapter." The translation systems churn through this, extracting meaning despite the corruption. The cryptech receives the information and conveys it to the general, who processes it through his own cognition matrices. A demon. That confirms what the energy traces suggested. This warrior fought the warp entity that threatened the tomb's awakening. In a sense, then, he was fighting the same enemy that the Necrons themselves would have opposed had they been awake. Does this make him an ally? Hardly. The destruction or dispersal of one demon does not erase the fundamental incompatibility between Necron and human interests, but it does complicate the situation. The general considers carefully before formulating his response. The cryptech translates it into symbols and sounds that might be understood. "You are trespasser in Tomb of Dynasty," untranslatable. "Your presence detected. Your nature analyzed. You fight creature of warp. This known. But you remain threat. Your kind claims worlds that belong to Necron Tyre. What reason not terminate you?" It is not quite a threat. Not quite a statement of intent. It is a question, genuinely asked, seeking information that will inform the decision that must be made. The general is consulting the Dreadnought itself on what should be done with it. The irony is not lost on the Grey Knight pilot, even in his damaged and disoriented state. How does one answer such a question? How does one argue for one's life to an ancient enemy who has every reason to view you as an obstacle to their goals? The pilot's training never covered this scenario. The Grey Knights fight demons, not Xenos. And when they encounter Xenos, it is usually as enemies to be destroyed, not conversationalists to be reasoned with. But he is nothing if not adaptable. Centuries of service have taught him to think on his feet, or in his current state, on his treads. He formulates a response that is part appeal, part information, part veiled warning. I am one warrior, damaged, limited threat. My chapter will search for me. My Imperium is vast. We fight many enemies. You have awakened in era of war. If you destroy me, you gain nothing but attention from forces you may not wish to engage. If you allow me to depart, you gain potential intelligence on daemon threats, and you establish that dialogue is possible between our kinds. It is a gamble, and he knows it. He has no idea if the Necrons care about Imperial threats. He has no way of knowing if they would value intelligence on demons. And the suggestion that dialogue might be valuable could just as easily be seen as weakness, as an attempt to buy time or mercy. But it is the best he can offer, damaged and trapped as he is. And so he waits, his systems barely operational, his power reserves draining, for the response that will determine whether he sees another day, or whether his service to the Emperor ends here, in darkness, far from his brothers, at the hands of an enemy he barely understands. The standoff. The Necron general's cogitation matrices process the Dreadnought's response with the thoroughness that millions of years of existence have made instinctive. Every word is weighed, every implication considered, every possible outcome calculated and assigned probability values. This is how the Necrons make decisions, through cold logic and mathematical precision, unsullied by emotion or sentiment. And yet, there is something in the Dreadnought's appeal that resonates beyond pure calculation. The mention of dialogue, of communication between species, touches on protocols buried deep in Necron programming. The ancient Necron tier had been a diplomatic civilization once, before the Citan corrupted them, before the biotransference robbed them of their souls. They had negotiated, traded, formed alliances. Those capabilities still exist in their programming, dormant but present. The general considers the tactical situation. The Dreadnought is indeed damaged. its threat level minimal in its current state. Destroying it would be trivial, but doing so would yield only a small amount of salvage and the satisfaction of eliminating a potential future threat. Against this must be weighed the intelligence value the pilot represents, the possibility of learning about Imperial capabilities and the modern galaxy, and yes, the intriguing possibility of establishing communication with this fragment of humanity. Moreover, there is a practical consideration. The tomb is not yet fully awakened. Many systems remain offline. Many warriors still sleep in their crypts. The Overlord himself has not yet risen. To make a decision of this magnitude, to potentially establish first contact with the Imperium, or to initiate hostilities through the destruction of their warrior without the Overlord's guidance, is outside the General's designated authority. The solution presents itself with characteristic Necron logic. Delay, preserve the status quo. Continue to gather information while awaiting the proper authority to make a final decision. It is not mercy, not compassion, but simple bureaucratic procedure. And yet, from the Dreadnought's perspective, the result is the same. The cryptech receives the General's decision and translates it into the holographic symbols and crude vocalizations that the human seems capable of processing. Decision requires higher authority. You will remain. Chamber will be maintained. Your systems will be preserved. No harm if you remain peaceful. Attempt escape will result in termination. This is logic. This is acceptable? The Dreadnought pilot processes this response with a mixture of relief and renewed concern. He is not to be immediately destroyed. That is good. But he is to remain imprisoned, with no indication of for how long. Days? Weeks? Years? His power reserves are limited. Even with minimal activity, they will not last indefinitely. Stasis might preserve him longer, but the idea of returning to sleep, of giving up what little agency he has in this situation, is nearly unbearable. Still, he recognizes that he has been given a concession, however small. The Necrons are willing to maintain his systems, to preserve him rather than destroy him. It is more than he had any right to expect from Xenos, who have every reason to view him as an enemy. He formulates his response carefully, aware that he is establishing precedents that might echo far beyond this conversation. I accept your terms. I will remain peaceful. I will not attempt escape. In exchange, I require continued life support and power for critical systems. I request communication. Isolation is harmful to my consciousness. Your cryptech. Can we continue dialogue? It is a strange request, and the pilot knows it. But the alternative, sitting in silence in this alien chamber with nothing but his own thoughts for company, is a particular kind of hell that he is not sure he can endure. The psychological toll of existence as a dreadnought is already immense. Add to that complete isolation in an enemy facility, and sanity becomes a precious resource that must be actively protected. The General considers this request. Communication presents risks. The human could gather intelligence, could learn about the tomb's layout and defenses, could use dialogue to identify weaknesses. But the General's analysis suggests these risks are minimal. The human is already isolated in the most secure portion of the tomb. He has no weapons that could threaten the structure, even if he learned its vulnerabilities. And his damaged state makes him reliant on Necron cooperation for his continued existence. Against these risks are potential benefits. Continued dialogue could yield information about Imperial capabilities, about the current state of the galaxy, about this Grey Knights chapter and their methods. The human seems willing to talk, perhaps even willing to answer questions. That represents an intelligence opportunity that should not be casually dismissed. The decision is made. Communication will be permitted within parameters. The cryptech will be assigned to maintain dialogue, to gather information, to assess the human's capabilities and knowledge. But the General will monitor these exchanges personally, ready to intervene if the human attempts deception or manipulation. The response is conveyed through the holographic display and vocalizations. Communication permitted, Cryptech will attend. Exchange of information acceptable. Deception will be detected and will result in termination. You will answer questions truthfully. In exchange, we will answer your questions truthfully where information is not strategically sensitive. This is acceptable. The pilot almost laughs at the irony. The Necrons are offering him an information exchange, a quid pro quo arrangement that could give him insights into these ancient Xenos even as they learn about the Imperium. It is precisely the sort of intelligence opportunity that the Inquisition would order him to exploit, even at risk to himself. But there is a problem. The Grey Knights are a secret chapter. Their very existence is classified information. The methods they use against demons, the psychic techniques they employ, the nature of their gene seed, all of this is information that must be protected at all costs. He cannot, must not, reveal details that could compromise his chapter's security or the Imperium's anti-demon capabilities. And yet, the Necrons are asking for truthfulness, threatening death if they detect deception. How can he navigate between these contradictions? How can he engage in dialogue without revealing that which must remain hidden? The answer comes from his training in information control, techniques designed for situations where Grey Knights must interact with those not cleared to know their secrets. Provide truth, but partial truth. Answer questions, but control what questions are asked. Guide the conversation toward topics that are less sensitive while appearing cooperative. It is a dangerous game, and one that could end badly if the Necrons prove more perceptive than he anticipates. But it is the only game available to play. I accept your terms, he sends. I will answer truthfully, within the limits of my oaths. Some information I am bound by honor not to reveal. I will acknowledge when a question touches on such matters, rather than attempt deception. I ask the same courtesy. If you cannot answer a question, tell me so, rather than providing false information. The general finds this response satisfactory. The human acknowledges limits to what he can share. This is honest, and honesty, even limited honesty, is more valuable than attempted deception. The arrangement is made, the parameters are set. What follows will be unprecedented in the tomb's long history, a dialogue between ancient enemy and modern warrior, between the soulless machine intelligence and the human consciousness sealed in metal. The cryptech is given its instructions: maintain dialogue, gather intelligence, assess capabilities, report any concerns immediately. The cryptech acknowledges with the quantum certainty that characterizes Necron communication and begins to formulate its first questions. But before it can speak, the Dreadnought makes a request that catches even the Necron's advanced processing systems by surprise. Before we begin formal exchange of information, I have a question. What is your designation? You have asked what I am. I have told you. But I do not know how to address you. My culture values names, identities. What may I call you? The question hangs in the chamber's air, transmitted through multiple spectrums and waiting for response. And in that waiting, something shifts. Because names, as both the Necron General and the Grey Knight pilot know, are more than mere identifiers. They are acknowledgements of personhood, of individual identity, of the recognition that one is speaking to a being worthy of designation beyond simple function. For the Necrons, who long ago sacrificed so much of what made them individuals, who exist now primarily as functions and roles rather than persons, the question touches on deep programming that rarely activates. The General has a designation, yes. He had a name once, in the time of flesh. But that name is lost, or irrelevant, or both. What remains is function, role, purpose. And yet, the question deserves answer. If dialogue is to occur, some form of identification must be established. The General formulates his response carefully. This unit's designation is Strategic Computational Matrix 798, Military Function, Command Hierarchy Level 6. Translation to your linguistic framework. General. You may address this unit as General. Your designation? The Dreadnought pilot considers how to answer. His name, his true name from when he walked as a whole man among his brothers, is sacred. It is recorded in the chapter's archives, spoken at ceremonies, remembered by those few who served with him before his internment. But to share it with Xenos, to give them power over that name, feels wrong in ways he cannot fully articulate. But he has already asked the general to share designation. To refuse to reciprocate would be an insult, would damage the fragile communication they have begun to establish. And his machine designation, the title by which he is known in his Dreadnought state, that can be shared without compromising his true name. I am designated Brother Ancient of the Grey Knights. You may address me as Ancient. And there it is. General and Ancient, mechanical being and mechanically preserved being, enemy and enemy, meeting in dialogue in the depths of a tomb that is tomb to both of them in different ways. What transpires in the days, weeks, perhaps months to come will be known to very few. The Grey Knights who still search for their lost brother, the Necrons of the tomb who monitor the exchanges, and the two conversationalists themselves, building understanding between two species who have every reason to destroy each other and almost no reason to communicate. But communicate they do, because in the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war, even enemies sometimes discover that they have more in common than they could have imagined. Conclusion and reflection. What we have witnessed here, in the depths of this forgotten tomb on a world without a name, is something rare in the 41st millennium. Not a battle, though the circumstances that led to this moment were born of war. Not an alliance, for the Necrons and the Imperium remain fundamentally opposed in their goals and methods, but something that might be called understanding, a recognition across the void of species and philosophy that consciousness, in whatever form it takes, shares certain commonalities. The Grey Knight Dreadnought remains in his chamber, sustained by Necron technology that is both more and less advanced than his own. His power is supplemented by the tomb's systems, his life support maintained, his consciousness preserved. And in the darkness, through holographic displays and translated vocalizations, he speaks with the cryptech, sharing carefully curated information about the galaxy he knows, while learning about a civilization that died before his species even existed. He learns that the Necrons were once flesh, that they gave it up in search of immortality and paid a price beyond measure. He learns of the war in heaven, of battles that shaped the galaxy itself, of enemies so terrible that even the mention of them is forbidden in Necron protocols. He learns that these ancient beings, for all their power and technology, are not the mindless monsters that Imperial propaganda portrays. The Necrons, through their exchanges with the Ancient, learn that humanity has not remained static in the 60 million years since the Necrontyre's transformation. They learn of the Imperium, of the Emperor, of Space Marines and the chapters that divide them. They learn of demons and the methods used to fight them, at least in general terms, that the Ancient feels he can share without compromising operational security. And both sides learn that isolation, the trap that their respective forms of immortality have created, is perhaps the truest curse they share. The Ancient has been alone, sealed in metal, experiencing existence filtered through mechanical senses while his brothers live and die around him. The General has been alone, his consciousness preserved while the Necrontyre he once knew have all passed into mechanical existence or been lost to time. In their dialogue, they find not friendship, the gulf between them is too vast for that, but something that might be called recognition. They are both warriors, both have served beyond any reasonable limit, both have sacrificed much in the name of duty, and both face an uncertain future in a galaxy that has moved on while they were sleeping. The Overlord eventually awakens, and the decision of what to do with the Dreadnought passes to his authority. The information gathered during the dialogues has proven valuable enough that simple destruction seems wasteful. But releasing the Ancient back to the Imperium presents its own complications. In the end, a compromise is reached that neither side fully endorses, but both can accept. The ancient will be placed back into deep stasis, his systems preserved and maintained. The tomb will complete its awakening, secure its position, and establish its presence in the modern galaxy. And when circumstances permit, when the diplomatic and military calculus suggests it might be advantageous, the possibility of exchange will be revisited. The ancient for information, for technologies, for whatever might be negotiated with the Imperium or its representatives. It is not freedom, it is barely even hope. But it is more than the ancient had any right to expect when he first woke in his alien prison. And as his systems power down again, as stasis claims him once more, his last conscious thought is of his brothers in the Grey Knights, of the reports he wishes he could give them, of the things he has learned that might prove valuable in the eternal war against chaos. The Necrons too remember this encounter. It is recorded in their databanks, analyzed in their strategic assessments, filed away as precedent for future interactions. They have learned that the younger races are more capable than their ancient databases suggested. They have learned that communication, even with those so fundamentally different, is possible when circumstances allow. And perhaps most importantly, they have learned that immortality, in whatever form it takes, comes with costs that calculation alone cannot capture. The Necrontier sought to escape death and lost their souls. The humans seek to preserve their greatest warriors and trap them in mechanical half-lives. Both solutions work, in their way. Both achieve the goal of extending service, preserving knowledge, maintaining capability across spans of time that would consume normal beings. But both also exact tolls that are rarely spoken of in the official narratives. Isolation, erosion of identity, the slow divorce from what it means to be fully alive. The ancient and the general, for all their differences, understand these costs in ways that their respective civilizations often gloss over in their pursuit of greater purposes. This is the reality of the 41st millennium, where the boundaries between life and death have become so blurred as to be almost meaningless, where consciousness persists in forms that would have been deemed impossible or abominable in earlier ages, where the question, what does it mean to be alive, has answers so varied and so disturbing that most prefer not to ask it at all. In a deep chamber of a Necron tomb, on a world that will likely never be recorded in Imperial histories, a Grey Knight Dreadnought sleeps once more. The Necrons watch over him, these ancient beings who understand the burden of preservation perhaps better than any living race could. And in that watching, in that mutual recognition of shared suffering across the void of species and time, there exists a truth that neither the Imperium nor the Necron dynasties would comfortably acknowledge. In the end, we are all prisoners of our own survival, trapped by the very methods we use to escape death. The Necrons in their living metal bodies, the ancient in his dreadnought sarcophagus, all seeking to serve, to endure, to matter in a universe that seems determined to grind down everything to dust and entropy. But perhaps, in rare moments like this, when ancient meets ancient, and recognition bridges the gap between enemy and enemy, there is something more than mere existence to be found. Not friendship, not alliance, but understanding, that rarest of treasures in the grim darkness of the far future. If you've enjoyed this journey into the depths of a Necron tomb, this exploration of what happens when two forms of immortality encounter each other in the darkness, then please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. There are countless stories in the Warhammer 40,000 universe waiting to be told. Countless moments where the grand narrative intersects with the personal, where philosophy and warfare combine to create something profound. And remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But sometimes, in the spaces between battles, in the quiet moments when ancient beings contemplate their existence, there is also something more. Something that might, if we look closely enough, teach us about the costs of our own pursuits of immortality, relevance, and meaning. Thank you for listening. The Emperor protects, and even in the darkness of Xenos tombs, service continues. Until next time, this has been Stories of Hammer.